I'm making this video because I've seen some good people who are advocating for a two-state solution, a Palestinian state next to an Israeli state. And I want to address that because I think I'm personally I'm tired. I am tired of living under perpetual war and a Palestinian state, just like what Hamas did in Gaza, means hardcore wars for eternity. And the reason I say that is because I believe that a Palestinian state has to be, by definition, an anti-Israel state. And on a personal level, you can live with Muslims, you can live with Christians, you can live with everyone, right? No matter what, but you cannot be living next to a state that the only thing that justifies its existence is destroying the Jewish people. So I want to make it clear that supporting a Palestinian state is a crime against humanity by definition, because I will prove that. This is what I'm going to talk about. But a Palestinian state is anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, and it's a call for war. That's it. That's what it is. And I know there are a lot of good people who believe that it can be something else, but it can't. Because just like Israel is the nation of the Jewish people, and it cannot be Israel once you remove Judaism from it. It will not be Israel anymore. It will be something else, but it's not Judaism. But it's not Israel without Judaism. It's the same thing. If you remove the anti-Israel element of a Palestinian nation, of the Palestinian people, there is no Palestine. That's it. There is no Palestine. The same way there is no Israel if you take away Judaism. That's just reality, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about now. So let's start with debunking the Palestinian narrative and understanding what is the Palestinian narrative as it's presented to the West and why it's a manipulation. So when the attacks on November 7th happened, many pro-Palestinian supporters claim that you cannot view history out of context. They usually throw random number of years as a proof of a prolonged suffering of the Palestinian people that can justify, well, basically anything, like anything. The horrors that happened on October 7th are unjustifiable, no matter what. But let's keep that game. Let's say it's resistance. And I know a lot of people even deny what happened, but so usually they talk about 75 years of occupation, even though part of that time it was under Jordan and Egypt, whatever. And they really liked starting talking about this topic from the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about the context. There is a good reason pro-Palestinians use manipulative words to briefly give an impression of what happened before 1948, but avoid real conversation about it and just pinpoint like this 1 year in history where Muslims were like kind of nice towards Jews and Christians. Of course, usually, by the way, it's not like it's either or. It's like you can only be nice to one minority at a time when it comes to Islamic rule, by the way, if you really want to get into it. So the year that the Jews didn't suffer too much, the Samaritans suffered, or the Christians suffered, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I have to love how a lot of my foreign friends said that the Palestinians win the world narrative. And for a long time, I couldn't grasp why, because I grew up here, I'm familiar with history, so I didn't understand how you can even believe that narrative, or what's in the narrative. So it really took me time to understand it. So that's basically the narrative and the way I understand it. The Palestinian people that had existed since the beginning of time, with the land of Palestine being their eternal homeland, had generously opened their arms to the European Jews refugees, fleeing the horrors of Germany, and instead of accepting their generosity, the Jews stole their lands and built an illegal colonizer state while expelling Palestinians out of their homes. Damn, if I didn't know any better, I'd be pro-Palestine too. But let's dissect it, because it's a lie. Lie number one: the Palestinian people had existed since the beginning of time. The truth: the Palestinian identity is an ad hoc identity, and even though it was accepted by a very small percentage of a population, even in the beginning of the 20th century, it really got adopted in the 1960s. And also, like, Palestinians, they're geniuses. I have to give them that when it comes to manipulating the West. They're doing an amazing job, because the Muslim Arab identity kind of gives away the fact that the Palestinians are not native to the land, because they're Arabs and Muslims, and that is something that arose from what is now Saudi Arabia. So they're calling themselves and taking the Palestinian identity is really a move that is smart. That's all I have to say. So the Palestinian movement is made out of two parts: the Arab and the Muslim. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is an iteration of the original Arab national call that was من 100% فلسطين عربية, or من 100% فلسطين إسلامية, which is, depending on your affiliation, is either from water to water Palestine will be Arab, or from water to water Palestine will be Muslim. So basically, that all identity is based on the Khalif and a Caliphate that is a part of the first Arab conquest. And for a very long time, and even to this day, there is no independent Palestine. It is not an independent place. It was part of Syria, if you look at the second Arab conquest that happened in 1840, or it is part of the whole region, which, by the way, originally there were Assyrians here, and Copts here, and Jews, and Samaritans and everything, but their identity was suppressed and erased throughout the time, and by the way, a lot of them still exist. But you don't hear about those minorities anymore, not too much. Like, for example, here is this dude on Twitter that said he's an Israeli Arab, got thousands of comments from Arabs that he can't be an Israeli Arab because Arab means Palestinian. So this is definitely an identity that was aimed to fool only the West. Anyway, how do you feel about Jesus being a Palestinian Muslim Arab? I believe it also means Judas was a Palestinian Muslim Arab, so yeah, go ahead. The great Arab leader Khaja Amin al-Husseini, who was the Mufti of Jerusalem and a great friend with Hitler, by the way, he had a great impact on defining and understanding the conflict back in 1930s, because he really liked organizing violent acts against the Jews living in Israel. And he noticed that it was way easier to incite the population using religious justifications to attack. So he really understood that the way you have to talk to the majority of the Palestinians is to use Islam. And yes, the Christians, for example, throughout the years did try to really emphasize the Arab nationality rather than the Muslim nationality. And it's interesting because one of the biggest reasons that the Christians joined the Muslims when they were thinking which side of the conflict they should belong to, I'm not saying all, but most, had actually used Christianity as an excuse, saying we cannot side with those who did what they did to Jesus. Therefore, we're gonna side with the Muslims. But spoiler alert, the Muslims are now ethnically cleansing the remaining Christians in Palestinian territories as we speak. Lie number 2. The land of Palestine is the eternal homeland of the Palestinians. The truth. A relatively small number of Arab Muslims were the result of forced conversion of the original population. Many of them, like for example in Nablus, which is Shechem also called, is forced converts from Samaritanism. There are Samaritans that were forcibly converted. And on top of that, only a minority has really arrived from the first Arab conquest. For reference, in the beginning of the 19th century, the population size was about 5% of what it used to be in the first century. And in 1880, there were about 150,000 Arabs living in the land, and about half of them have arrived between 1830, 1840, with a second Arab conquest of Ibrahim Pasha. Most of the Arabs, and therefore the Palestinians, are immigrants from neighboring Arab countries that follow the job opportunities that were created mostly by the Jews and to some extent the Brits as well. And it is definitely not in the definition of eternal. They're not natives. They're not indigenous to the land. Line number 3. Any claim of generosity towards the Jews or any minority for that matter. The truth. Remember what happened on October 7th? Until the creation of the Jewish state, it was just another Tuesday. Usually it was because Arabs were triggered by Jews who tried to pray in the holy sites in the Holy Land. Of course, the Jewish provocative desire to pray might justify it, but it won't explain all the times it was just for fun. And there were times like that. This is what the Rambam, who had fled the so-called Golden Age of Jews in Muslim-ruled Spain, and then spent his years between the Jewish communities of Arab Egypt and the Crusaders' Kingdom of Jerusalem that rule over the geographical area referred to as Palestine, had to say about the Muslims. By the way, this is a person that is referenced a lot by some pro-Palestinian propagandists, and trying to say that he is a proof that the fact that this philosopher could have operated under Islamic rule is a proof of how kind and generous the Muslims were towards the Jews. And here is what he had to say about them.
God has entangled us with this people, the nation of Ishmael, who treat us so prejudicially and who legislate our harm and hatred. No nation has ever arisen more harmful than they, nor has anyone done more to humiliate us, degrade us, and consolidate hatred against us.
Okay, just for the skeptics, here are the years that the Jews were attacked in recent history. 1834, in Tzfat for 33 days, October 7th style attacks happened. In same city, 1838, in 1886, Petah Tikva, in 1908, Jaffa, in 1990, 1920, Tel Hai, Jerusalem, 1921, Jews were attacked in massive numbers in Jaffa, Petah Tikva, Hadera, Rehovot, and there was also an economic boycott on the new Jewish population. In 1929, Jews were attacked in Jerusalem, Hebron, Tzfat, Haifa, Tel Aviv, and Zaitim, Gadera, Ben Shan, and small villages as well. Several villages were burned completely, like Kfar Tor, Kfar Urim, and Jews were forced out from Hebron, Gaza, Shechem, which is Nablus, Jenin, Akko, Migdal Eder, and basically a big devastation. And in 1936 and to 1939, and I will come back to it later, there was the Great Arab Revolt, and I'm skipping it because I'll call back to it. In 1945, there was an economic embargo on the Jewish population that was cross-national. All the Arabs in the Middle East had decided that they need to hurt the Jewish community in Israel. And in 1947, the war started, basically, like the Independence War and intifadas and suicide bombers and building tunnels and kidnapping people and everything. That's after. By the way, you might have noticed that there were not any major events, just minor events, for about 48 years between 1883 and 1886. Well, luckily for the Jews, the focus went mostly to Christians and Samaritans during that period. The Samaritans were almost completely annihilated. But by the way, they were saved last minute by Jewish intervention. Their numbers went down to 150 people, 150. And there were more than 1 million Samaritans living in Samaria, which is in the West Bank, in the 4th century. This is what ethnic cleansing and genocide really looks like, by the way. By the way, the same with the original Christian population that is believed to have disappeared completely. So the Christians that are living in Israel today were actually Christians that came with the Crusaders. Okay, line number 4. All Jews come from Europe. The truth. In 1880, there were 27,000 Jews living in Israel. They were joined by Jews from Yemen, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and the worst parts of Europe. Jews fleeing the Germans came way later, and they were followed by the Jews when the Israel was established, who were completely, utterly, ethnically cleansed from every Arab country. And also there are Jews from India, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Georgia, like me, Iran, and Iranian Jews also had to flee due to the Islamic Revolution in 1979, and now Iran is like messing up the whole area as well. Good for you, Iran. Good job. Your people seem to hate you, but Obama loves you, so, and by extension, Biden too. So, genetically, most Jews are about half mix. Half of their genetics are originally from Judea, and about half is mixed with other nations. Line number 5. Jews stole Palestinian land. The truth. Jews were purchasing lands and moving to the Holy Land. Unlike Muslim migrants, Jews were mostly allowed to settle and purchase land that seemed uninhabitable. Let's just say that the chances of getting malaria and dying was very, very high. In fact, combined with the constant harassment and robberies from their Muslim neighbors, it was more of a nightmare than a dream. The majority had decided to go back to the abusive environments they came from, and many others just gave up on the concept of life completely and ended themselves. That's how bad the situation was for Jews who tried to live in Israel. And they fought for it. I personally believe that if you do something like eradicate malaria, something that plagued the region for so long and killed many Arabs, Muslims who lived here. And one of the reasons that the population grew, of the Arab Muslim population grew so much, is because the Jews managed to eradicate malaria by finding treatment, doing science, drying swamps, and basically winning the war against malaria. And those are just the basics. Like, this is just me talking about the Palestinian narrative. I didn't even get to the world involvement of it and the Western narrative. And after that, of course, the Israeli narrative, which is also important. All right, let's talk about the West. The sweet, human-loving, liberal, justice-chasing West. Here's the thing. The most objective way I can put it is that there is a problem, especially in Western standards. There are stateless people who are living in the territories that Israel conquered in 1967 from Egypt and Jordan. The internationally agreed upon consensus today is that every person should have citizenship in at least one country. By Western standards, this is a profound tragedy, that there are people whose papers make it a little bit harder to travel. Listen, as a traveler myself, I understand. I love traveling. But just look at your universities. There are a lot of Palestinian students there, so somehow they manage. Some of them at least manage to get out. So maybe it's not too bad. Because, listen, I, until recently, have never heard or saw someone in the West that is from Yemen, for example. I know Yemeni Jews, but never met anyone from Yemen in the West. Recently I have, but for a long time I've never met one. So here's the reality on the ground. Under their established governments, they had the right to vote exactly once. Under Israeli control, they might not get the voting right, which is basically like everyone in the Middle East. I don't know if there are anyone who can vote anywhere here. So why is everyone so obsessed with a Palestinian state? I don't think they are. I think what they're obsessed about is Jews. And by the way, I feel like, yes, Jews are like very on the media focus, but I want to acknowledge that basically all the ancient Middle Eastern people were mostly ethnically cleansed and so they're not even like acknowledged and they're still here. So I don't know what's better. But Yeah, and there is also like this perception, like between us minorities in the Middle East, that we have to support each other because, let's see, Azerians went through a genocide. The Armenians went through a genocide. The Yazidis are gone. They were ethnically cleansed, and you know what happened to them. So, of course, nobody mentioned the Palestinian state when they were under occupation from Egypt and Jordan. And by the way, the Gaza Strip was under military occupation, so they didn't have any voting rights. And Jordan stripped from many Palestinians. They actually took away their passport in the 90s, so that's not cool either. Yeah, why so obsessed with Israel? I really want to know. Just like, I mean, I live here. I understand why I care. Anyway, let's get back to topic. How can the Palestinian statelessness situation be solved? One, a new state can be created where they would receive citizenship, aka the Palestinian state solution, or existing countries can give them citizenship. Literally, the first solution of two-state solution is like what the path to hell is paved with good intentions sentence was made for. Maybe a two-country solution might soon seem like the best solution in France. I wouldn't recommend it though, just for the record. The second solution is a bit of a taboo, but let's be honest, all of us in the West, and not only the West, are facing the same kind of like situationship, okay? Where we really need to solve a problem and examine all the options. And right now, with the speech in the West, the liberal, human-loving West is so restricted that you can't even talk properly about what can be done between even people, because it's such a taboo to talk about. And it's, you know, it's Europe, it's the US, it's all of us. Like, we have residents, people who reside in the same territory, who have intentions that might be harmful. And by the way, South America, I know you think you're like out of it, and good for you. I've been just traveling there. It was amazing. I love South America so much. So you might think radical Islam has nothing to do with you, but just so you know, I want to bring something to your attention, is that a lot of the problems in South America with the drugs and corruption has a lot to do with radical Islam and groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran, who are sending people to basically ruin your countries with drugs and corruption, especially if you're like from Colombia or Venezuela. Just so you know. All right, let's go to my narrative. Yes, the Israeli narrative. Just like the Palestinian narrative, here is a summary of the Israeli perspective. The proposed geography of a two-state solution creates borders that are practically impossible to defend. By the way, that's kind of like the no Israel argument as well. Borders like that means that it's a security threat that basically guarantees continuous forever. And the problem for many Israelis is that the Palestinian society abuses women and children in the most... Okay, the same thing they did to us on October 7th, that's just their normal day-to-day life, okay? They throw gays off the rooftop, they chase minorities, and 98% of the population is self-proclaimed anti-Semites. And this is the culture in both Gaza and the West Bank. A two-state solution is a guaranteed recipe to a never-ending war. Peace cannot be reached without trust, security, and stability. The Palestinians' hate is destructive and irredeemable. On personal level, Jews can trust individuals, but on a collective level, they can never be trusted. They lost it because they've been doing the same thing for the last 1,000 years. Like, let's review some history. Supporting Palestinian state is in no shape or form supporting the Palestinian people. In 1936, which is like the Arab revolt, that is a beautiful example because this is what is happening again and again and again. So the Arab leadership had decided to make sure that Jews and Arabs won't live together. In a best scenario, the Great Arab Revolt was supposed to bring economic disaster and drive the Jews out of the land. Also physically, but economically. There is some weird perception in the Arab world, I think in the world in general, that Jews love money so much that they just chase it, or like once they are out of money, they're gone. I have to say something, like here's a number one Jew example, which Zelensky, the prime minister of Ukraine. Everybody thought he's gonna run away and be like, okay, he's Jewish, so he's gonna run, chase the money. And he's there, and he went and fought and went to the army. You think you survive persecution for that long without having a strong spirit and a fighting spirit? You don't. You disappear. The money is not the reason. This is not what driving us. The Jewish tradition, and we have pride in it. That's what's driving us. So let's make that clear, okay? So the second best scenario for those Arab revolts leaders was that the Jews and Arabs will be separated financially because their economies were very intertwined, and they were preparing the ground for war by doing that. And what happened in reality was that the Jews just worked harder and thrived, and the Arabs were not allowed to work, and they suffered. What is really amazing about it, that we can see how prepared the Palestinian leaders are to hurt their own population. For example, in this video, that how Hamas executed a Palestinian boy from the West Bank when they penetrated Israel, just because he was working for the Israelis, and he was a bus driver, and his fate was sealed. Amazing. And that attack occurred just the day after Israel had allowed to add way more work permits from people from Gaza. And when people, so many Gazans were depending on Israel, working in Israel, and same with the West Bank, and by doing so, they ruined their ability to earn their living. And it's the same thing that happened in the 30s. Sometimes I feel like we're living in a loop, seriously. And what's even more amazing, back in the 1930s, Arabs who tried to revolt against that revolt were killed. And as a result of the uprising, 200 Brits, 400 Jews, and 5,000 Arabs died. Yes, the Arab leadership targeted their own people more than anyone else. Their lives didn't matter to Husseini, didn't matter to Arafat, don't matter to Sinwar or Ania. Any normalization with the Jews is forbidden, no matter the cost. The individual Arab doesn't matter. The individual Muslim doesn't matter. Not even the collective matters. What matters is to bring down the Jews. And this is why I'm saying supporting a Palestinian state is supporting war. Help the people. If you care about the people, care about the Palestinians, let them be able to work. Let them live. Let them be in peace, and don't force them under the authorities that are always corrupt. Their authorities, 100%, whether it's the nationalist Arabs or the Muslim Arabs or the Muslim movement, it's the same. Also, the UN is corrupt, and the world it represents is biased and obsessed with annoying Israel. UNRWA is a shame. Close it. By the way, to earn the rights to be an eternal refugee, where all of your descendants can be refugees, your great-great-children can be refugees, and get money from the UN, all you had to do is live for 2 years in the Holy Land to be considered a Palestinian, and then live during the war. 2 years. A Jew or a Yazidi whose families resided in Iran since the time it was Babylon were allowed to enjoy their refugee status for about 5 minutes. So this is discrimination. The UN is corrupt, and I think the UN represents the world. What is also baffling, that even though it seems like most people in the West seem to agree that ISIS state shouldn't exist, that logic is very flexible. Most Palestinians believe in Sharia law and have ISIS-like mindset. Not all of them, many of them, or they're enablers. Okay? And a lot of them. It's a society that suffered from abuse that once goes through the generation from parent to child. I don't know if there is, of course, Taliban is, the families of the Taliban, and I guess in Afghanistan is very much the same, but 95% of Gazan men beat their wives. The violence in the families of the Arab Muslims who reside in between the river and the sea it's a violent society. It's something that it has to be addressed. And when the West closes their eyes and ignores the facts, they're not doing favors to anyone. And everything is like both Hamas and the PLA are corrupt and rotten to the core. And why stop? By pushing for a Palestinian state, you're ruining the Palestinian people, the individuals. You're ruining their futures. You're pushing for more bloodshed. Exactly like the United States, allowed the rise of monsters like the Taliban and the Iranian regime, and the people under those regimes suffer. And the Iranians are so brave, and I admire them so much. Really, I cannot wait for them to be liberated. And I know that just like the US threw the Shah under the bus, it can do the same with Israel, and it's doing it right now. And one of the reasons that the US gives us supplies us with weapons is because they don't want us to expand our weapon industry. And they basically, like, what it is a bribe. It's a bribe so that we wouldn't develop our own industry and then compete with the American industry, because that's the truth. Nothing that the US does is against its own interest. When it gives money to Israel, it's never against its own interest. It's either oil or suppressing our weapon industry. You have to understand that the Israelis do a lot and to help the world to counter terrorism. A lot, everyone. So nothing the world does. And actually, it's crazy that they are so certain that the US will put veto on the stupid UN resolutions in the world wants to play this double game where they pretend to be super woke, and they don't take the risk of actually supporting Israel truly and publicly. But at the same time, they know that if Israel was not there, they are doomed. So it's such a weird position to be at. So yeah, I don't know. It's like, and the other thing is that the paper that you sign, both with the Palestinians and the West, is worth less than toilet paper, because whatever you sign with them, it's a takia. They say it because they say it. They say it's good for now. As long as the agreement works for us, we will respect it. That's it. So, and the West can't even. I mean, I have no words. Like, what? So, no matter how many countries will sign up to guarantee that they will protect the Jews from genocide, it really seems more likely that the West will be the one to supply the torches when the time comes. I mean, the West is currently actively allowing a rise of political agendas that think that attacking Jewish businesses is some sort of resistance. I mean, in the US, in London, those Jews, what? If you're just justifying the existence of Israel with your liberalism that is chasing away Jews. That's amazing. And the West can't even. I mean, I have no words. What? I feel so sad for the children in Yemen, the people everywhere, the people in Iran, those who actually need support. they don't get anything. It's incredible. So yeah. So being miserable and begging for money is also part of the reason the Palestinian state has to be in war with Israel forever and ever, because the stupid world that is super biased and everything ignores, like that's their actual business model. They have to be miserable. They have to show that they're suffering. Otherwise, how would they get money? So the more the West keeps pushing the two-state solution, the bloodier the situation in the Middle East will get. That's just the way it is. Okay, right. Now that we have expressed our anger, I have expressed my anger with the West, let's talk about how we can reach peace. Like, what's the solution? Because I think, unlike Europe, to be completely honest with you, at least we kind of have a way out. Because if we go and stop pretending this is not about religion and stuff like that, because yes, it is about religion, and you have to understand, and I think it's important to understand, religion is ideology. There is no difference between liberalism and Judaism as like an ideological, I mean, I don't think liberalism and Judaism are similar or something like that. They are at some points, but definitely not totally. I mean, Judaism is an ideology, is a way of thinking, and the same goes with liberalism and Islam and everything, and Christianity. And it's important to understand it's also politics. So we have to talk about it. And so if we go through and talk about our beliefs, then there is a way for at least Israel to exist. Europe, maybe not. So the thing is that the Mufti of Jerusalem, when he incited people using the Quran and Hadith, he chose to prioritize the description of the end of the days in the Hadith. The end of the days in the Hadith describes how Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the good Muslims will commit jihad and intifada and them all, okay? And that for him was a call to action. He used that Hadith, and Hamas uses that Hadith, and basically the Islamic world uses the Hadith, and there are also like verses in the Quran and stuff that you cannot use as well, to explicitly call to end the Jews, like down to the last of them, everywhere around the world. The Mufti of Jerusalem, he chose like the great Arab leader that is he's on the same level of like at that time of fame and respect as like Hitler or Mussolini or Mao. And people barely talk about him, but he was important. He chose to focus on that because the Quran states explicitly that Israel is home to the Jews. And let's just respect that. And only one strong Israel can prove that God is with us. And that is the Quranic verse, Quranic verse that it was based on. It's not stale, it's still true. And only strong Israel can change that. And by the way, there is an historical precedence to changing the relations, because this is exactly what happened with Christianity. Until the establishment of the State of Israel, the Christians were looked at Jews as someone who God abandoned them, and therefore they, we are less than. But once Israel got established, Christianity had to change. And once Israel proves that it's strong, Islam would have to change and accept that Israel, just like the Quran says, is the Jewish homeland. And if you ask me, a two-state solution is a clear invitation to follow through the verses that say otherwise. So, peace shall come when the Jews will prove they're strong, and it will also delegitimize many of the terrorist cells that are here to hurt the world, basically, just saying. So I believe that it's in your interest, many of your people, some of you are Islamists and communists, I guess, that like for you, you want to see the world burn. Instead of bringing the end of the world upon us and chasing Jews behind trees and rocks, how about we delay as much as we can the end of the world and just live in peace and support the liberal state that has reached out for peace a million times and got slapped in the face and realized that it just cannot be. And if you want peace here, we have to be strong, and it has to be one state solution. Thank you very much for listening. Open to hearing your thoughts. But yeah, you're probably not going to convince me otherwise, just saying. Oh yeah, I like this video and stuff.